This presentation reflects ongoing research and a very substantial feasibility analysis that we did last year, showing just how this conceptual system works and analyzing whether or not this is a feasible option for Southeast Michigan. And what I'm going to do in this presentation will more like a 35,000-foot overview so that you can get an idea of how the system works. And hopefully, once I have completed this overview, you'll have a lot of questions that we can begin to address. So this is a global concept, and the concept I'm talking about here is trying to understand where Michigan can fit, and Southeast Michigan in particular can fit, and in very particular how Detroit can fit as a leader in global freight commerce. As you can see by this banner here, that sort of describes our market. One of the biggest challenges that people face in moving freight in and out of a country is getting there. And specifically, think about getting there to the industrial Midwest. And we know the Great Lakes states and the Midwest states and what that consists of. It's not actually transparent. And for a long time, Chicago's kind of been the center. That's been the place that people want to get to. And what I'm suggesting in this presentation is that Southeast Michigan perhaps is an even better location, and one in which, if we take the imagination to make the move, could make us quite central in North America. And this global picture gives you an idea of just how central we are in the industrial Midwest. And this is a goal of many transportation companies to get there. Okay, so this is Detroit to the world via Montreal and Halifax. So you need to think in global terms and not to think just in local terms. First of all, Michigan needs to have a paradigm shift. This is a major issue. Now, I'm not taking anything away from manufacturing. Michigan sees itself as a manufacturer, but as we all know, there's been a progressive loss of manufacturing in the United States generally, in the Midwest in particular, and in Michigan especially, and that's just because we are the center of manufacturing for the United States. And that doesn't mean that this has to continue forever, but it means we need to have a much wider perspective on our economic role in the world. Detroit itself, as everyone knows, has been hollowed out economically and physically, and that has left Michigan pretty demoralized. That is an economic consequence of certain types of planning and economic decisions, and I argue here that those can be reversed. I would suggest that Michigan's new identity should include itself as the North American transport hub. Geography creates opportunity. Geography creates opportunity for us, and for those of you who are familiar with the field of geography, it has actually always been kind of a key to economic development. We have the Great Lakes River crossing to the United States Midwest. We have the most central location in North America. One of the things that people don't think about is they keep looking at a map of the United States, and that's only one piece of North America. But if you see at least the United States and Canada as one economic region, you realize that we're actually quite a bit more central than we think we are. And third, this is a model based on rail. Rail is the future in many respects for freight transportation, as we saw in the previous presentation, perhaps also for passenger. It produces the lowest carbon footprint. It costs much less than truck transport. So it has an economic as well as an environmental significance. Our existing infrastructure, as well as our geography, creates a great opportunity. So we have 4 of the 6 North American Class 1 railroads. We have multiple limited access divided highways across the United States that come into Michigan. So Interstates US 70, Interstate 75, Interstate 69, Interstate 94, Interstate 96, and Interstates 80 and 90, which are just south of Michigan, crossing through Toledo. And we also have the Canadian interprovincial highways 401 and 403, all of them basically come right into our region. So a Class 1 railroad, for anyone who doesn't know, is the biggest class of railroads, the largest railroads, the ones that really drive the North American economy. Two of those are the Canadian Pacific CP and the CN. The CN happens to also include a number of railroads. These railroads have assembled pieces together over the last 30 years since deregulation of the railroad industry, but it includes the Illinois Central, so it is tri-coastal. The other four railroads are also very important. We have the Western roads, the Burlington Northern, or BNSF, and the one that Warren Buffett just bought. And we have the Union Pacific, and in the east you have CSX and Norfolk Southern. And what I want to convince you at this point is that our routing is actually directly on the Great Circle route. And comparing us to Norfolk, which is probably the most clear competition, you can see these descriptions that are on this slide. Algeciras is basically the port of Gibraltar. It's a container port. And you see on the west, Halifax sticking out there as the farthest easternmost accessible point in North America. That means that's the shortest water route. And so we have the shortest water route to Algeciras. We have the shortest water route to Monrovia, which is the point sticking out in Africa. And when you're going through Gibraltar, you're going through the Suez. We obviously are the shortest from Northern Europe. That requires no explanation. But it's also true going through the Suez and crossing to India. And passage to India is an important part of this story. And that passage, I would argue, goes all the way to Southeast Asia and perhaps even to the Pearl River Delta, where we are the closest, shortest access point for that freight. Now, this is what this routing looks, and this is a very important map to understand. What we have here, primarily you see the routing of the CN Railroad, and you see its easternmost point is in the port of Halifax, which is the deepest natural ice-free port on the eastern seaboard of North America. And you see that it ends in southeast Michigan. And it ends in southeast Michigan exactly because Detroit is the short river crossing to Canada. This routing is the CN routing, but there's also another routing that's here that I'll explain a little bit more, and that is on the CP, their east coast port is the Port of Montreal. And so you see Detroit is a place we're familiar with on the left-hand side. And the routing on this CN Railroad route is to Halifax. And from Halifax, you can reach any place in the world quite efficiently in a low-cost, fastest time, and so forth. The other options, as you see also, the Detroit access point is the one that gets to the industrial heartland of North America. Chicago is actually kind of on the western edge of that. Now, we've been heading to Chicago for a long time, but that's because Chicago has been able to convince itself that it's Chicago and convince us that it's Chicago, and I would argue that we can be something very, very similar to that. That happens to be where the eastern and western roads meet and don't match with each other, and that's one of the reasons why Chicago has been what it is. But a number of railroads, including the CN, are finally getting around that problem and creating a more efficient routing through Chicago. The other route that I would point out is to Port of Montreal. And sorry these graphics didn't quite come up this way, but you can see Montreal. Montreal has a tremendous port. In fact, its current capacity, its current operational size is 1.5 million 20-foot equivalent containers per year. Halifax, if it built out completely, was filled out completely according to its current build out, is also 1.5 million containers a year. Montreal is planning to expand its port by about double, so that would go up to 3 million TEUs a year. And that gets to become a very serious portal for us and a very serious gateway that we can sell. And this is, again, the reason why Detroit is such a great location for building an inland port. You can see how the web of railroads, which are the dark blue, and white, the interstate highways or trans-Canadian highways, all intersect here in Michigan, and that provides us a network advantage.